Well, as you can see, this is Lady Mechanika by Joe Benitez. I got this very excellent hardback edition of Volume 1 the other day. Bought it off Amazon. My local LCS doesn't seem to carry that, they couldn't even pull it up, which I found interesting. Hoping this thing stays in focus. So it's come to my attention of late that I need to start promoting my upcoming comic book, Little Girl Lethal. And a lot of people don't really know what it's about. They just see the art and go, oh, that's pretty cool. And I'm like, yeah, it is pretty cool. But nobody knows what it's about. It's just some schoolgirl with a sword and a gun. And there you have it. So I'm going to take a page out of our boy Zach's playbook and, try to introduce people to who I am and what I'm about. A lot of what Zach puts out there, I agree with. I agree with what he says about the industry and a lot of the behavior I see there. I don't agree with him on a lot of his taste, often in how he reviews, especially movies and television. I think he doesn't have the best taste. Let's just put it that way and leave it at that. Also, a lot of his choices in books, I can take or leave. Sometimes he really is on the money, and other times it's hit and miss. So yeah, there we go. I think that when I envisioned this universe that I'm trying to put out there, it started out more as kind of an amalgam of a bunch of different things. I think a lot of people do that. They see stuff they like and they kind of mash it together, try to make something new. Just like Joe Benitez did Lady Mechanika here, which for me, this is about as good as you can do a vision of things. This, it's just a gorgeous piece of work, and if I could make something in this realm with my artist, Whiskey Pint, who's a Russian guy out of Vladivostok, I would be so happy. I think my artist is fabulous. He's different than Benitez, but he knows how to envision the things that I put forward to him, even though we have this language barrier going on, and we work around it. And it takes more time. Pages don't come out as fast, as he is not generally a comic book artist. He's more a graphic artist and fine art artist who has kind of got into doing pinups and that sort of thing online and in the digital form. But he can use traditional media as well. So I think I got on a tangent there. Let's look at what Benitez has done here. And you get to see, that's not very good, but you see everything that he does here is just magnificent. I can't even stress how good I think that this is, and the story is right along with it. And then these are alternate covers and so forth. But you see that, and you see my comic will probably be a little bit more risque than this one, but as you can see, he makes a woman look like a woman, yet it's not overly sexual, which that's pretty cool. I don't care if things are sexual or not, but Benitez makes a woman look just wow without being, gratuitous, and that is something to be admired. Let's see if we can look at that. I mean, come on, just wow. So, I want to get to a certain page here, and I don't want to show too much stuff, and let's go a little bit farther. I'm going to jump some pages. There's one of the, she's the bad girl of this particular part of the saga of Lady Mechanika. Let's just focus on that for a bit. So my universe is set in an alternate Earth, and so basically all comics are an alternate Earth, so we should be fairly used to that. And I have to admit that I'm taking a great page out of Frank Miller's Sin City, and various other things. I think Akira has influenced me as well. A lot of cinema has gone into my vision of things, and of where I live. I live in the Mountain West of the United States. Basically, valleys and mountains are surrounding me, and I see my world through that lens in a lot of ways because that's my environment. So, in this world that's it's dominated by 5 great empires that span basically the continents, and they vie for hegemony over the rest of them and try to take the world. The most dominant of these empires is kind of a type of what the United States would have been, but it's much larger. It's a little more, instead of states, they're nations that have unionized together to have more consolidation, more protection. But the nations of this union are far different than, say, the states would be in our current form of government. And in one of the states, a state called Lost Peaks, there's a megalopolis of the same name, Lost Peaks. And if you were to kind of place it on the map in their world and analogous to ours, that would be right where Yellowstone is. And although the geography is far different than Yellowstone is in our world. And there are geological similarities to this world, to ours, but there are also great differences as well. And in this world, which is because of the disparity between the rich and poor, we have that, but it's to a much greater extent, especially in the nation of Lost Peaks. People, there's unimaginable wealth because the valley is blessed with great mineral wealth, great mineral deposits and resources. And that has allowed the city to rise in prominence to have a global reach. And there you go. That kind of sets the stage, builds the world a little bit. If you wanted to think of what Lost Peaks looks like, there's a great kind of hourglass-shaped lake in the center of a massive 100-mile long, 50-mile wide valley, surrounded by a ring of titanic mountains that reach far beyond 30,000 feet. So, kind of like the Himalayas, where their prominence is even more dramatic. So it's a dramatic setting, and it's to get to the valley. There are canyons that come in there, and underneath the city is a great super volcano, like Yellowstone, and so the city is kind of in a place where there's geysers and there's a strange geological phenomena, and at the one end there is actually a volcano that's active, and at one point in Lost Peaks history, it has blown its stack and caused great destruction. So the city knows the sort of Damocles that kind of hangs over it, and Lost Peaks has different nicknames. One of them is Doomtown, kind of a play on words from Boomtown, because it is a boomtown that's been around for about 100 years, and the wealth that it has allowed the city to become pretty wild and woolly. Now, there's portions of the city which you would think, like New York City has boroughs, they have what they call claims. People made claims to the area to do mining, and the claims became portions or districts of the city. that are run by the houses that own them, essentially, like feudal fiefdoms, and so that there's a lot of intrigue and so forth that goes on between these houses that own the claims. Because of the unlimited wealth for these houses, they become very decadent in their opulence and their hedonistic lifestyle and do as thou wilt sort of thing. And, the people who are peons, the plebeians, to this kind of aristocratic class, the elites, they become just basically pawns, playthings, and so forth. All right, that's about 11 minutes of preamble, and so let's turn the page, see what we can get. See, I'm probably getting bored of looking at that. Let's go forward over here. Oh boy, apologies. That's probably not fun to look at. Well, that'll be good enough. This is my first time doing this, so apologies for the amateurish audiovisual abilities. Yeah. So my main character is a girl, and she's of age, but she looks much younger because of her particular stature. She's not very tall. She's about 4'11" to 4'10", somewhere in there. And so she looks like she's young teens, maybe on the edge of being out of a tween, but she's actually over 18. And she looks fully matured, but she also looks very young because of that. She was sold into a form of slavery that's not very good at a very young age, and it kind of molded some of her psyche. Sexual slavery. Done some research on it. It's not a happy way to be, and it causes a lot of problems later in life for those that don't get some therapy and so forth. However, she's rescued at a certain point by a killer, an elite assassin, who does wet work for those who can pay for his highly trained skills. And he rescues her, and he makes her his adopted daughter and trains her to be a killer like him, and she finds great aptitude at those skills. So she's about 18-ish, and she spent about a decade in his care and tutelage. And over that time, she's been allowed to prey on those she's found that used to be her captors and her enslavers and her abusers. And the way she deals with them is not a pretty thing. Again, this is something you might say this is kind of a Dexter idea, a serial killer killing killers or abusers, thus in a way also like the Punisher, that sort of thing. The Bride from Kill Bill. Those are things I've lifted from other stuff. One of my major influences for this also is the Destroyer series by Richard Sapir and Warren Murphy. I've always liked that. It's very pulpy. And there's some other things that I've lifted from, like spy novels and westerns that I think add nuance and texture to the story. So for the last decade, I've been kind of working on short stories and novelization of this, and I'm kind of a stickler and never satisfied with things, and so I've never really put it out there other than let some friends read it and play around with the idea. But I think it lends to a comic book in this story. This young girl, Sugar Lightspeed, and her father X. Now, I know that some might say, oh, that's a pretty cliche name. Well, that's fine. I like it. So that's how it's going to be. He doesn't have a name, and all of his names all of his pseudonyms, his AKAs, are with an X, and so I'm happy with that. And in all the stories, you never do really find out what his name is, because he was an orphan in one of the rougher parts of Lost Peaks, a place called Magma Downs down there by the volcano. Grew up in what they call the deeps. Every one of these claims has catacombs that go underneath it where the mining has gone on, and the most wretched and poor have sunk down into those areas and inhabit that area, these these tunnels, and they're underneath basically the entire city. So there's part of that, the mythos and the world itself. And he rose out of that kind of terrible place to take his place as what they call the Hearstmen, the elite assassins. And these men and women ply their trade across the globe for people who can afford them. Now, Sugar doesn't do that, and she's never intended to do that, and he kind of gives her leash to just basically do what she wants to do. His moral compass is such that he cares for her and basically her alone, and there's a few other people he has some tolerance for, but everybody else is basically just waiting to be a target. That's X for you. And so if she wants to go out and kill people, he lets her go out and kill people, and she does. And she does so when she lets her rage go, lets it loose. It goes from just simply taking somebody out to carving them up very artistically. Let's put it that way. And that's Sugar. Now, people are like, well, that seems pretty rudimentary, and why would I want to watch that? Well, Sugar has an origin, and the origin is more than just some poor waif that was sold into slavery. And it goes a little deeper and goes to the history of the city itself and how she's an integral part of it. And as she takes her revenge, essentially gets retribution for what was done to her, it causes ripples throughout the high society that commits the acts that they do on the people that they do, that she was well familiar with. And over time, it starts to cause a chain reaction. And then at one point, there's events that take place that cause an epochal change within the entire world itself. It causes a cataclysmic kind of an apocalyptic event, and the world itself changes, and she's a key part of what happens to that world in that instance. And there's the saga, essentially. I've written other stuff that takes place afterwards, how the world does change, but that's not relevant to the general story currently. So the first comic I'm doing is just kind of an introduction on what she does for fun, essentially, which is fairly murderous and full of mayhem, and about the two demons that kind of war within her. Now, people, as the story goes on, if I'm able to continue this after I do a fundraiser, it will become more involved and intricate as to how things work. But this one is a fairly simple, straightforward story to introduce the character and kind of set her on her path. In many ways, similar to the how Lady Mechanika was done in the first issue of this series, this run that Benitez is doing so magnificently. I would get to see my wonderful Kia here. This is my work car. It's kind of beat up. And there's a lot more that would go on. I could talk about, but I think I'll leave it at that. If this is something that piques your interest, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. Ask any questions that I can try to answer. And maybe if things progress, I will set up a Patreon. And I would like to also say that a good portion of anything that I would raise from a fundraiser would go directly to my artist, and then the rest of it would be, to set up things like publishing. I have no illusions about making it like Zach has just done with $200,000, but it's fun to dream. But I would just like to make something. I'd like to be creative and to leave something to posterity, even if it's a crazy, pretty psychotic little tale about a very damaged girl. In the future, you'll find out that she might be a little bit OP, overpowered, but the problem with being overpowered is that, like Superman, learning to control your overpowered state is the greatest challenge. And for her, discovering her powers and discovering that there are consequences to her actions might not be as, happy. And you can't tie it up in a bow like a lot of Hollywood movies are. And I like the gray areas. I like the grime and the grit. I like the hard-boiled. That's what I like. And if you like that sort of thing, please like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Thanks for listening. And we're going to flip back to the front because I like that. Thank you, Joe. Man, that's some good work right there.